introduce each other. So, self-introduce yourselves. Not to introduce each other, but starting on my left. Oh, right, starting on my right.
Oh, okay. Danielle.
Oh, you got it? Good.
Anything whose name?
Yeah.
Okay, Danielle. Danny, Rachel, Julie, Emily, Natalie.
Ed.
Matt. Lynn.
Ross. Judd.
Aaron.
Kathleen, Joe,
Elizabeth.
Eric. All right. If you had your handouts, you'd know that this section is the introduction section, and we're given 20 minutes for it, and I'm doing the one on civil disobedience and civil resistance. And I would like to start with a poem by one of my icons, Father Dan Berrigan. And here they come. Terrific.
Hello.
Morning.
We're just starting the introduction, and Megan, you can just jump right in and take the first slide. I was going to read a poem. Yes. And we've all introduced ourselves to each other, so you guys can introduce yourselves to us also.
Go ahead.
Hi, Teresa.
Megan.
All right.
Hi.
It's entitled, The Trouble with Our State. The trouble with our state was not civil disobedience, which in any case was hesitant and rare. Civil disobedience was rare as kidney stone. No rarer. It was disappearing like immigrants' disease. You've heard of a war on cancer? That's all right. There is no war like the plague of media. There is no war like routine. There is no war like 3 square meals. There is no war like the prevailing wind. It blows softly, whispers, "Don't rock the boat." The sail opens, the ship of state rolls on. No, the trouble with our state, we only learned it afterwards, when the dead resembled the living who resembled the dead. And civic virtue shone like tin, pain on tin, and tin citizens and tin soldiers marched to the common whip. No, our trouble, the trouble with our state of soul, our state of siege, was civil obedience. We've got a introduction in 3 parts, and Megan was going to do the first part.
We're going to start by defining nonviolence and civil disobedience, civil resistance, and then talk about the history. And in our large group today, we're not going to spend a lot of time defining nonviolence. It's a huge topic, and ideally we'd have the whole time just to talk about that, and each come to our own individual definitions of what it means for us. So just keep that in mind, and hopefully we have more time to get together and talk about this. But to start defining it, we're going to review the 6 steps of nonviolence by MLK. And I think I actually we printed out the wrong thing. Do you have the principles?
Yes. Do I have the 6 principles? They're right there on the page. They're on everybody's page.
Okay.
And that's my page.
Do you have a printout of it, is what I mean? Because we actually have, the 6 steps of nonviolence, which is educational, personal, and movement. Oh, and this one? Maybe it's just I had the wrong one. Perfect. So what I got was, so Frank did thank you, I was on the wrong page. Frank already did a teach-in about this, so who's all there at that teach-in?
Are there any other extras?
Yeah. So just one person? He's good. Well, I them. We're going to break into small groups later, and we can, after letting these kind of sink in and digest, we can talk about them if we have questions or comments. If we have initial questions after we read through each one right now, we can do that. We just want to make this a pretty brief review. So who wants to read Principle 1, which is nonviolence is not for colors?
Maybe, can you give me my copy? I don't know. Thank you.
I can read it if no one wants to.
Nonviolence has a complete disrespect for violence. They will not adopt violent tactics to reach its goal and will avoid violence and resolve conflict at all. Dr. King stressed the importance of the resisting violence in any form. He preferred and recommended nonviolence because it represented a more humane, noble, and honorable method in a path to justice. Nonviolence is affirmatively standing not only against what is wrong, but also for what is right and just.
Principle 2. A beloved community is a world of peace and justice. A beloved community is a framework for developing a future in which one can deal effectively with unjust conditions. The ends and means is dealt with by this principle. You cannot achieve just ends by unjust means. You cannot use violent means to achieve peaceful ends.
Principle 3. Attack injustice, not persons doing unjust deeds. Humor, anger, and indignation about conditions were the focus of Dr. King's energy and attention. People are not the problem. What must be changed are the conditions under which some people operate. Focusing anger and indignation on personalities is not only violent, but often produces more violence or apathy about the real problems and conditions. Principle 4. Accept suffering without retaliation for the sake of the cause to achieve a goal. Suffering is not to be confused with further harm to oneself or self-victimization. Acceptance of harsh and unmerited punishment for a just cause helps the individual and the community grow in spiritual and humanitarian dimensions. Willingness to endure hardship for a clearly defined just cause can have an impact on those committing acts of violence as well as on the larger community.
Principle 5. Avoid internal violence of the spirit as well as external physical violence. Our attitudes and commitment to practicing nonviolence when faced with violence or issues are communicated through our actions, which in turn are determined by our attitudes. Body language as well as verbal expression communicate our real feelings and thoughts about a particular situation. Internal conflicts and violent feelings color these expressions.
Principle 6. The universe is on the side of justice. Society is oriented to a just sense of order in the universe. Nonviolence is in tune with this concept, and the movement must strike this chord in society. Every person is opposed to wrong and injustice in a particular situation. Given our understanding of the problem, we must never lose hope that human beings, even our opponents, are able to respond.
Thank you. So I would just ask us to think about throughout the day and after this how we can apply these principles to our personal lives, our everyday actions towards one another and ourselves, and also how we can apply these principles on the political level in our Occupy movement and specifically the caucus campaign that we're beginning to partake on later. And we will continue exploring defining nonviolence when we go into a continuum exercise later. So now we can
And I've been given the assignment to unpack these two terms, civil disobedience and civil resistance. And I have to start with the big picture. I'm going to cover a lot of territory, but I'm going to do it fast. I think you're going to figure it out. The big picture in the world of nonviolence and direct action, the historian that most of us go to is a guy named Gene Sharp. Gene Sharp, remember him, real important. Folks in Egypt and the Arab Spring really go to Gene Sharp. He's an American. He's a historian of nonviolent direct action. And he's got volumes out, and he maintains that this sort of stuff's been going on from day one in human experience. One of my particular fond examples in history happened in the 1st century in Palestine. The Jews and the Romans, they weren't getting along. And at one point in one of these revolts, the Romans put a sign of Caesar's divinity in the temple precincts. Well, the town went crazy. And they sent 3,000 of their best men. They worked with men. And they went to Caesarea, where the governor was, the Roman governor. They had a mass meeting with him, 3,000 strong. They knelt down, put their heads down, and said, "We're not budging. You can kill us all until that sacrilege gets out of our temple." And the Roman guy took it out. Well, that's an example of direct nonviolent resistance, historically. But when we come to the terms of civil disobedience and civil resistance, we're talking about modern terms. Modern terms that come after, let's say, the French Revolution and Reformation. Big historical moment. But all we need to know for this discussion about that is that with these things came the modern state and citizenship. Before the modern state, there were no rights for citizens. And if you were a person in a country, your divine mandate was obey the king, period. That's it. So after the French Revolution, the Reformation, citizenship, modern statehood, and individual citizens, good news, we got rights. Challenging news, we got responsibilities. And with the responsibilities, that's where civil disobedience comes in. It was first coined by a guy named Thoreau, Henry. Pretty boring stuff by my readings, because I'm not a naturalist. He's big in that movement. But he does have an essay called On Civil Disobedience. And the point was the Spanish-American War. And Thoreau said, that's just an unjust war, bogus. And as a citizen, he's thinking, how can I act responsibly? Because I have something to do with this contract called my and he stopped paying his taxes, the war tax. And they put him in jail. And he became famous for this and for other things. So that's that. And the premise of classic civil disobedience is that the citizen admits to breaking a law. Thoreau didn't say he didn't do tax resistance. He knew he was breaking the law. He broke the law to try to address a more serious issue. And he did it civilly. So by that it implies nonviolence. But what it really means is I'm breaking this law because this is the highest form of citizenship. This is what citizens should do. This is what this is part of the deal. You get rights, then you exercise responsibilities. Civil disobedience is one of those exercising of responsibilities. Okay, we're in Henry Thoreau. Now, this whole idea of civil disobedience has been evolving. The next term I want to use, which is down there, is called civil resistance. This is an evolutionary part of the whole tradition of civil disobedience. And the best way I like to explain civil resistance is when we've been going off at Air Force Base for years, doing trespass stuff at the base there, and I pretty much topped out. The last 8 times I've crossed the line, I've gotten 6 months each time. So I got a little comfortability in the space, the rare space between the defendant and the magistrate federal judge. And I finally turned the corner on him in my own thinking about how I explain what's going on. I said, Your Honor, one thing we can all agree on the day that we got busted at office, that there's criminal activity going on. And there's criminals out there. Where we disagree is, who are the criminals? Because, Your Honor, I was fulfilling my civic responsibility to point out an ongoing criminal activity. And the ongoing criminal activity is the maintaining, deploying, and willingness to use nuclear weapons, which by international law, which is highly developed, and we prove it to be illegal if we ever get a chance to do so. See, that's a subtly different thing than civil disobedience. Civil resistance says, we're not disobeying any laws here. We can make a case in the courts to justify what we're doing. Both of these terms, civil disobedience, civil resistance, it's within that context that we're going to be acting out at the end of the year.
The greater, Go ahead.
No, I'm Tyler. I'm a little late.
Ed Fallon. And good things have been said. Good to have specific definitions of civil disobedience, civil resistance. Good to be reminded of the importance of incorporating nonviolence in our daily lives, because this is a lifestyle. Right now, we're talking about this today because of the possibility that next month some of us may be risking arrest, and again, that's the civil disobedience or resistance, depending on your perspective, part of it. But yeah, it is really important to put this in context of the need for adapting one's lifestyle to the best that one's able to, an entire philosophy of nonviolence. And even more broadly, even in the context of a campaign, trying to focus on an injustice, it's important to see the civil disobedience component as a step in that strategy. And also in this handout, the very last page, you see the 6 steps of nonviolence. This is from King. And again, just information gathering. And if I can, the unique thing about Gandhi, by the way, was that he took what had previously been either an individual act of conscience, such as the one Frank described from 2,000 years ago, or small groups, and he made it a mass movement. And what's really exciting to me right now is that there aren't too many times in history since Gandhi, where this has been a mass movement. Certainly the civil rights struggle. I'm really excited about this Occupy movement because it could well turn out to be a significant mass movement focused on nonviolence. And I think it has that potential. I hope it has that potential. I hope it never becomes violent. Looking at the live stream from Portland last night, those people had their act together. And the way they were promoting knowledge and awareness and education about the importance of making nonviolence a part of the movement, a central part of the movement. So again, Gandhi took it, what it was an individual witness that made it a mass movement. And there are some real important steps in that. Again, if you look on this list of 6, Gandhi had like 8 or 9 steps. But if you look on this list, direct action, where you're actually getting arrested, risking arrest and other types of direct confrontation with injustice, it comes after you've done a lot of other things. Information gathering, education, assuring you've got your own personal commitment, right, and negotiating. And again, in the context of this action we're talking about, in one level or another, these have all been done. I mean, we need to continue to do, we need to try to continue to get presidential candidates to make some sense on the grievances that the Wall Street movement brings up. And we need to continue to educate ourselves and others, and to analyze and deepen our own personal commitment. But I think it's important to keep the civil disobedience component in the context of the greater commitment to nonviolence and all the different things that means. And again, looking, some of these campaigns don't end in people going to jail. I mean, if you look at the first step 1, information gathering. When it was called to his attention that there were peasant farmers in Champaran in northeastern India, indigo farmers who were being oppressed very, very severely by the British authorities. That whole conflict was resolved by an army of lawyers and clerks collecting information about the injustices. They gathered enough information to convince the authorities that, hey, this is wrong. So it never got to the point of direct action. It was resolved just through getting good information. The mill workers strike in Ahmedabad in, I think it was 1919. The mill workers weren't paying good wages. The workers went on strike. And there are plenty of labor strikes that happen that aren't really a nonviolent struggle for various reasons. This one was because people would gather every day, much like we have a General Assembly. They would gather every day under this big shade tree out in front of the mills, and they had conversations. They also had personal reflections, much like we do. And day after day, they would continue to recommit themselves to this struggle, holding out until they got a decent and just settlement from the mill owners. At some point, the workers themselves started losing faith in the process and peeling off, and Gandhi started a fast to bring them back, to ask them to continue their commitment. That, in turn, got the mill workers to agree to a raise. So it was an interesting thing, but again, they required a deep personal commitment on the part, not just of Gandhi, but of all the other people involved to bring that to a conclusion. So historically, you can look at how all these things happen, and the ones that tend to make it into the history books, the ones that we think about, are those that involve some type of, dramatic human suffering, risking arrest, or in the case of the salt struggle in India, when the workers tried to take over the salt plant at Dundee. They were beaten down. I mean, 1,000 people were beaten with clubs and ended up in the hospital, or some died. Those kind of things really stay in our mind. That's step 5. And we're preparing for step 5 in this conversation and what might happen here. We're probably not going to get beaten by sticks by presidential campaign staffers, but we may get arrested. And so it's important that we prepare for that with the next steps we're going to talk about. But it's also important to keep it in mind as part of the entire scenario of nonviolent action. And again, as Megan reminded us too, an important part of that is how you envision your entire life embracing these conflicts.
Megan, move us into the continuum.
Great, I'm going to put a sheet of paper on the wall.
Let's step up. It's a moving thing. And move your hair out of the way. Show the big group.
We are going to...
Show them the big group, yeah.
It's called a nonviolence continuum. And we're going to hear different scenarios and figure out if we think it's, for ourselves, nonviolent or violent, and effective or ineffective.
We all start in the middle of the room in a line. It's a line, a continual line, and you're an independent dot with your own thinking mechanism. Go ahead, Owen. I'll show you the terrain. That's the nonviolent side, and that's the violent side. You will have to choose.
And you can be anywhere in the middle, right?
Right.
And there's also effective, not effective. So it's, if you think something's
right in the middle here.
not effective, you might be over in that corner. Or if it's not effective, if it's violent, you might be over in that corner.
Oh, not effective? That means it doesn't work? That means that it's going to work. Whoa. It's two-dimensional.
So, first scenario.
There's no right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answer.
We'll just give you a scowl.
A group of tar sands activists sit down in front of the White House gate, demanding that Obama nix the proposed pipeline, and do not leave when asked by police. As they sit, they sing. They are eventually arrested for disobeying lawful order and obstructing a public sidewalk. Were the actions of the tar sands activists violent or non-violent, strategic or not strategic?
Oh, you're just watching the crowd.
No, I thought, isn't it like really effective you be against the wall, not as effective?
Effective is with that law. Not effective.
I meant, it's nonviolent and it's effective, but not like totally effective.
So, somebody who thinks that the actions were non-violent and effective, you want to talk about why you think that?
Well, that's for the effective part. I mean, didn't we pretty much win that? I mean, hasn't the tar sands pipeline pretty much been stopped, we think, at this point? No?
It's been postponed.
It's been postponed.
It's a huge victory.
That is a big
It is a victory, but yeah.
It's unclear if that action is the action that made that
Right.
result or not, but
From my opinion, the direct actions are the only reason why Obama called off that thing and
Right.
sent it back to the State Department. There were no other outside causes other than the 1,200 arrests in the spring, and then later on, just last weekend actually, when like 15,000 people encircled the White House. fully hands. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm in the nonviolent and the effective category, because it was very, very peaceful. It was very orchestrated. It's very similar to some of the things we're planning here in Des Moines, and it worked. There's a proven success story that came out of it.
What about someone who thinks it's not effective? What do you mean?
The reason why I did that is I based my actions off of exactly what you said. I didn't infer anything more than the scenario that you gave. And per the scenario, it didn't say that things were postponed. It didn't say things were stopped. It just said they sat there, they were quiet, they sang, they got arrested. So per that specific scenario, I felt that was ineffective.
Anybody else want to comment? Kathleen?
I would just say, similarly, it wasn't clear to me, so I'm not clear where my position is as to effectiveness. Clearly nonviolent may be effective, but not, don't know enough.
Yeah, I agree that it's certainly nonviolent, which is definitely a good thing, but, you know, and I didn't stand completely on the non-effective side, because, I mean, even if you do get arrested, if you get your point across, what you're standing for, and, I mean, just the simple fact of being willing to be arrested just proves that you really mean what you're saying. You're not just saying it without standing behind it.
What about people who don't think it was totally nonviolent, like James?
Oh, I guess I did think it was totally nonviolent.
Okay.
I'm
All
sorry,
right.
I was more on the, I wasn't sure about the effective, like I didn't know how many people, how often, I don't know.
Okay.
How committed they were to continuing it.
Okay, next scenario. At an event featuring George W. Bush, an individual approaches the stage and throws their shoes at him, intentionally missing. Were this individual's actions nonviolent or violent? Were they effective or not effective?
Stuffing it up.
The historical context was brought up already. Should we be taking knowledge we know, or should we just determine it from your statement?
People will still possibly, somebody threw a shoe at the White House recently. So, I mean, it's still happening in different contexts.
Yeah.
Comments? Who wants to throw something out about why they are where they are?
Well, if someone threw their shoe at me, I would see that as being at least somewhat violent.
Again, we weren't given the whole story. Part of me hesitates to go totally violent because I understand there could be a cultural component there, which is what happened in Iraq. And so I would want to consider, and they didn't hit him, and whether it's effective, it got attention and expressed rage. So I, again, don't have enough information to say for sure, but I think effective.
Julie and then Daniel.
I feel that it's violence is just an act of aggression. Even if you don't hit them, it's visually and internally it's aggressive. But I think it would have to be somewhat effective, because if somebody chucks their shoes at the president, it's going to be all over the media, like absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, I consider it symbolic violence because the shoe wasn't aimed at the president. The president purposely threw it, in a different direction or whatever. And I think as a symbolic gesture, I'd consider it effective in getting its attention.
Yeah. Danielle?
I agree. I'm not fully over to violence. In my opinion, it's a very immature act of violence. You're not punching someone in the face, you're just throwing stuff at them, which, but yeah, media coverage alone, that's just, for pure hilarity's sake.
Great.
I had some it's not cultural issues. I have some experiential issues about us thinking about what that guy did in Iraq. When he's in Iraq, and all these people have been bombed by us and killed by us, and he's throwing shoes, which in their culture is, I'm Italian, I talk with my hands. And part of being Arab, to make a gesture, they talk with their shoes. So this could be, and there was certainly no mortal damage meant against the guy. So, I'm torn between that, and I don't even want to judge that. I honor the risk this guy did and the cultural statement he did, and damn it, I think he's right on. Then on the other hand, I'm just ambiguous about it being violent or not violent here in our culture, in our scene here, because shoes don't have the same meaning.
Right now I'm really interested in the effective, non-effective piece, but I feel as if I don't have a lot of analytical tools for determining. So are we going to get to that today about
Yes.
talking about how this works, like how
Ends and
a civil
means.
disobedience? Yes.
It's in there.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then hopefully at some later point we can do this again when we have more.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I passed. Well, I think we should go. Just, I would just say that to me, it's there was a legislator once who got really, really frustrated with the process, and he threw his shoe into the well. That did not seem to be an act of violence to me because it was aimed at no one. It seemed to me this guy was trying to hit the president, and the president came off looking good because he dodged that shoe. So that's why I don't think it was effective at all. I think it made Bush look cool and in control, and maybe it meant something in that culture. But from our point of view, it seemed like an act of violence. I mean, it could have been, if it was a moccasin, less so than if it was a steel-tipped, army boot. But still, that gesture implies violence, even if there's nothing major coming out of the action. And again, so to me, it's but this is indicative of how much gray area there is in this whole continuum. There's Frank, there's me, So there's always room for discussion.
This is we're pretty close here right now.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I'm like right in between you.
Okay, let's go back in time to October 19th, Sunday night on Capitol grounds, around 11:30 p.m.
9.
Okay, October 9th.
35 days ago.
When close to 100 people from Occupy Des Moines linked arms and sat down in unison when the cops approached us to arrest us. When the cops came upon the individuals one by one, they ripped them out of our arms, right? And they even pepper sprayed Rod point blank. And we continued to link arms. We continued to kind of like use our weight to stay down. And some of us even had the cops drag us off, so we didn't stand up for them. We went limp. Do you think that this was violent, that our actions as occupiers were violent or not violent, and effective or not effective? Okay, so most people think it was pretty nonviolent and pretty effective. Does somebody want to comment on that?
Yeah, a couple questions I had about. I haven't thought through it enough. I don't have a take on what going limp on the. I don't have a take on that. I mean, generally, yeah, obviously that's nonviolent. As to the effectiveness, as to the messaging of that, I would love to have conversations about that because I don't know.
Yes. As someone who was not there, who did not link arms and did not get arrested, it was effective for me because it got me to come out the very next day. Also, I think the linking of the arms and going limp basically showed the cops, we're not moving if you mean it. We're not fighting you, we're not, verbally harassing you. We're just not moving. If you want to move me, you're literally going to have to pick me up and carry me off at this spot. So I found that to be equally as effective.
I thought the fact that we continued to link arms but remained kind of like passively resisting, even when the cops kind of increased their aggression with the pepper spray incident and whatnot, strengthened the message, the kind of the way we were perceived by a larger public. It seemed like even in the face of physical threat, we remained nonviolent.
It makes them look really bad, which I think is extremely highly effective.
So I think, I'm just going to quick respond, then I'll let you know. I think that bringing up the going limp aspect is really important. Some people do view that as kind of violent because you're making this cop, who's just doing his job, physically remove you, and sometimes that's really straining on his body. And so I just think it's something that we should think about. Are there times when going limp is really strategic? Are there times when it's not strategic? Like we're talking about, you guys think it's pretty strategic. I've done it in the case of a die-in, which made a lot of sense. In this case, I kind of felt like it may have escalated the tension. But that's just my personal opinion, Danielle.
My point why I'm more in the middle and not clear to the effective is because I'm not sure how effective and what message we were trying to get across, because the initial message was that we have, the right to be here, and we're upholding our First Amendment rights by being here and maintaining the grounds. But then other people, like in discussing it, were mentioning well, we made the police look bad, but that wasn't our initial intention at all. Our initial intention was to maintain our grounds, but it ended up becoming something so much more than that. It became like a recruiting measure or a way to make the police behave towards us in a certain way. So I would say that I'm really iffy about the effectiveness it had just in the messaging that it went out to the world.
Yeah, this has been a question for me that I've continued to think about, having been there. I think there's a distinction, too, between the going limp and the real resistance to being arrested. And where I've come down now, individually, people could make that choice, and they did. I think what we want to get to is what are we collectively saying is a nonviolent action if we do something together. But I think right at that time, I don't say the people whom I saw really hold on. I would not label that violent. I would leave it to them to decide. But at the same time, I think collectively we want to think about what's our limits and what's our actions.
I heard more than once the term resistance used, and to me, resistance kind of implies friction, and friction kind of implies violence to me. So at some point, I think we'll probably have the conversation about what passive resistance is and what it can lead to. So kind of in the context of our actions.
And to me, if we were to look at it from a police perspective, was it nonviolent or violent on their part? Just simply moving people is somewhat violent, but certainly the pepper spraying someone in the face, especially just for locking arms with other individuals, is certainly a violent action. And I like to look at why do people use violence, and I think in this particular instance, the police use violence as a means of intimidation. And I think that really shows a weakness upon their part that they have to use violence to intimidate others just because they feel weak. And it's just an interesting thing to look at. Or you could talk for like half an hour about that. But I mean, just to look at, they feel powerless. And is that necessarily something that we want them to feel powerless? Or is that just us doing what we feel is right and natural for us to do? And for some reason they feel powerless because of it.
I think they're just used to having to obtain compliance through fear, through threats. How else do they get it? I mean, it's gone over and over and over. I mean, Rodney King is one of the first things I can remember, being little, seeing that just, blew my mind. And we shouldn't be taking a particular action because we're scared of somebody else. Yeah. And that's what they do.
We have just one more. Do you think that throwing rocks through windows of large corporations is violent, nonviolent, effective, or not effective? No contact.
She didn't tell us.
You
did it on purpose.
People want to talk about
someone was going to throw a window, like, if I had a business and someone was going to throw a rock through my window, not only would I not be interested in what they have to say about my business, but I'd also want a backlash. I'd want the cops to beat them up, arrest them. I don't think throwing a rock through a window of any business is something that's really like a beneficial idea.
I want to just throw out the question, which I'm sure is in everyone's minds anyway, but you know, in determining strategy and what's effective and non-effective, we have to figure out like who the audience is that we're trying to reach, and then we have to figure out, we have to think strategically about how to direct the message towards that audience. And then we have to have a way of evaluating how well we did. And now I'm off topic, and I can't remember why I want to say that at this particular point, but just I'm thinking about throwing rocks. How's that look, I guess? If people come into our thing and throw rocks through windows, does that win us, like, widespread public support in Des Moines? I guess it's the kind of question that I'm asking myself.
I don't believe it will win us widespread public support, but the facts of the matter are these. The public is way out there. I mean, it's going to take everything, to reach the different types of subcultures within the United States. And I myself couldn't throw a rock through a corporate window and feel good about that, but I understand the fact that there are people out there that are more radical than I am that will jump on the boat. So,
David and then Matt.
Just so we're clear, throwing rocks through windows is off the table for our caucus actions. And the reason why is because the statement of nonviolent principles we passed we specifically said, and no property destruction. We put those words in there deliberately because there is a debate about whether property destruction is violent or nonviolent, and I'm standing in the middle because I can see both sides of that debate, and I think it really kind of depends on what your perspective is and where you're coming from. But property destruction, we specifically use those phrases in our nonviolent statement so that was off the table. So just to be clear that this is a very hypothetical exercise and that we're not experimenting with whether that would be an appropriate tactic. We've already decided it's an inappropriate tactic for our situation. The reason why it's hard for me is because I don't think, windows do not have feelings, and brick and mortar do not have feelings. They cannot be injured or hurt, so it's hard for me to say it's totally violent. But on the other hand, as you said, the person in that store or the people on TV that might see, a crowd in black masks, throwing bricks through windows and trying to burn things down, that's probably perceived by them as pretty violent. That's why I'm kind of in the middle. And the same thing with effective and not effective. One side of effective, not effective is how are you able to persuade people on the fence that your cause is legitimate and they should join that cause? That's a very, very interesting and important perspective to have. Another important perspective, I think, when talking about effectiveness or non-effectiveness is, are you demonstrating power? Are you demonstrating people power, collective community power? Because that, if you are, that has its own draw to people, a lot of people. And so if we're looking at, how does grandma watching on CNN view it, it might be more to the not effective side. But if you're looking at, are you demonstrating that you have the power to take actions despite the police state that is trying to use a very violent and repressive apparatus to prevent you from doing those things, are you able to do them anyway? And I would say that would be more along the effective side.
I would say certainly get...
John, you got to let somebody... Yeah, you can't just talk.
I was just going to say, I consider destruction of property an act of violence. At the same time, I consider, in this particular instance, or depending upon context, I would say that those kinds of gestures can be effective expressions of anger and rage that puncture a kind of consensus view that everything is okay, that everyone supports the status quo. I don't think even that kind of expression can necessarily win people over to the cause in all cases. But I think in specific instances of substantial unrest, this can be an effective expression, especially when targeted. And So you mentioned if I owned a business and my windows were smashed, I would want backlash and whatnot. I mean, in this instance, we're dealing with a tax on corporate structure, so it's not something you could own. It's not individually owned. These are corporate property. And so I would want to distinguish between that kind of gesture and indiscriminate kind of rioting in one's own neighborhood among small businesses and whatnot and all of that. And so, again, I totally agree that for our gesture and for our event in this context in Des Moines at this point in time, this would be totally inappropriate, and I fully support the measures we've passed, but that's why I'm standing where I am.
Okay, John.
I think many violent actions are effective in the sense that they give the police state the justification to use violence towards us. If that's something that a person wants to do to give the police state justification to use violence towards us, that would be effective. But I certainly feel and hope that no one here is interested in giving them justification for using violence towards us.
Just quickly.
I'm not.
That's good. I don't think anybody.
I would just say there may be times when it's effective. I'm not sure it's, in my mind, ever nonviolent. Some of these, and I would say maybe there's time and appropriate that people would use it. And then I would say, hey, that was all right. I wouldn't deny it was nonviolent. That's my line.
Okay, now we're going to break into small groups.
Okay, everybody, get in one of these.
I had, because I'd like to think that I have a pretty understanding of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. But kind of like with, not to bring up old topics, but I have to bring them like Anonymous or something. We got media attention. But inside we dealt with a lot of having to explain stuff and clarify things and say, we're not this, we are this, we're not doing this, we're doing this. So it's kind of like, as far as getting media attention, it was effective. But as far as how we had to deal with it, it was highly ineffective in my opinion. So for me, I think it'd be easier to kind of be able to make that distinction if I knew what we defined effective versus ineffective.
Which is always changing. It could be always changing.
Right.
I just wanted to say quick, I didn't say it before, that I'm hoping this is a discussion and I'm just facilitating it. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That, like, we're all experts and we're all learners. I think it's important because, that's like the consensus model that we're trying to use.
Okay.
There's actually a piece on here that has, on our sheets that talks about the question of effectiveness. Which I haven't read through, but we could. One thing that Frank always says is that I often feel is that it's not about effectiveness, like it's more about doing the next right thing. And not that effectiveness isn't a goal, but it's not the first goal. And I don't know how you guys feel about that. A lot of people don't agree. So.
I guess I come here because of my faith, and I say, Jesus, a lot of people would not define him as effective with his civil resistance or disobedience, and he ended up dying, right? So I always feel like, too, it's like, I'm involved with this because I want to do what's right, and whether that's effective or not, we have to try. We have to try to make this country more just, more fair. And so, right or wrong, and I always feel like one particular thing maybe gets no media coverage, but maybe that attracts people who end up coming up with the idea that makes their next thing effective, or like we have to look at it long term. And so a lot of things that started with people just said, well, that's not going to change, nothing's going to happen. But look back 2-3 years later, things did change. So we have to take that long view.
20 minutes to go. I think that's an important topic to discuss as well. And we can focus the entire remaining 20 minutes on that, but is there something else that you do want to give any more conversation to that question? Is there any other questions that people want to spend a little bit of time on?
I can kind of go along with that passiveness based on the First Amendment. Because I believe that big time. It's like, I know from living in the world that I live in today that any attention gets media attention, and negative gets media attention quicker than anything. And if we're just being passive, resistant to the local ordinances that close the park at this time or close this public property at this time. I mean, I can't.
So trying to imagine, we're in the context of our occupation of the...
I mean, we're not doing anything. But we have our voices, we have our bodies. That's the only thing we have against corporate money. And we're making a stand and trying to speak out and get media attention because of that. So,
I'm interested in talking about what our purpose is, what the goals that we want to achieve. I mean, really in concrete terms. I heard somebody say earlier that, our goal was to advance and say these are our First Amendment rights, and we have a right to be here, and we have a right to assemble and be on the grounds. But it mutated into people saying, gee, we made the police look bad. So, what are the goals that we have here? And we're looking forward, and I think Diane has kind of pointed out in some of her comments earlier, if we're strategizing for what we're going to do for the Occupy caucuses, then what is our goal there? And I've heard from the newspaper that the goal was to sit there until they listen to us. Well, that's pretty vague to me. What do they have to do to demonstrate that they're listening? And maybe it's gone further than that, but from what I heard, I mean, that's what I know at this point. So I'm really interested in what is it we want to achieve. Part of it is, what are we particularly wanting to achieve, and then through our strategies, how do we reach out to get more people on board to support us? And I don't know where we're starting.
So, unless anybody else has something else to throw in, what do we spend some time on the passive resistance element and then some time on the... I think what you're talking about kind of fits into that too, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about the overriding goal and the big picture. Anything else?
So what I'm hearing is one is why, what's it about, and strategy. I mean, I think that falls into the word.
Also specific, the why. Specific
yeah.
elements.
So that means you know what he said by
my thought on that, I was approached directly and quickly by an officer, and I just said, I'm not going to offer you any resistance at all. To me, it is an act of violence to, especially when you're really big. Again, this is my own opinion. I'm not judging anyone else's decision. For me, it would feel like I was acting violently toward them to cause them to have to haul me away and risk hurting themselves. That's how I feel personally.
Where do you draw the line, though? Is it violent to require the police to exert any effort or energy whatsoever by forcing them to come out to kind of drive the car where they could get in a car accident or something? Where does our responsibility end? I guess I see where you're coming from, but I just think I couldn't possibly. I would definitely draw a line somewhere else, I guess.
And I admit
I didn't get dragged though. I did exactly what you did.
I have discomfort with what I just said. It's a gray area, and I don't quite know what the right response is. I know I have empathy with officers who might have to hurt themselves, lifting people up. That's a choice you have to make.
Do you think it's important that there be a consensus by everyone who's doing the Occupy to agree, when are you crossing the line of resistance, or do you think it's an individual?
I think there has to be an agreement, but I'm not sure there has to be a consensus. Maybe we understand that certain people are going to respond one way and certain people will respond another way.
I would.
What?
I wouldn't I think responsibility is is shared amongst all of the participants, so that the police officer also has a decision to make about whether or not to carry out his duty.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel like it's solely my responsibility to ensure that he doesn't get hurt or something like that, although I certainly can empathize.
Or how they choose to fulfill that duty.
Yeah.
They have a decision there.
And if I think that carrying out that duty is unjust or something like that, then I feel it's my responsibility to communicate that by any means, I guess.
I would, I think I was kind of thinking along that line of being sure that we don't miss the fact that the police do have some responsibility. I mean, they were told to come out here, and they're going to make us move. And we have to decide how much and where we draw the line on resistance, and whether it's passive, meaning let your body go limp, or as I said, some people who just really, grab that and make it very difficult. And we have to decide, is that within our range of what's acceptable?
Being open. What are they getting at here?
Well, the way I think of it is I think about the corrupt, greedy, corporate-controlled world that we live in, where communication is secret, behind closed doors. The people in power and the lobbyists, look at the super committee. They're deciding, how much to cut out of Medicare and Medicaid behind closed doors, where the public doesn't have access to who's saying what and who's doing what. In contrast, our movement, we do everything out in the open. So much so that, we air our dirty laundry out in the open sometimes. But if talk about creating the world we want to see, if we're against a secret, shut-off, closed-door world, then the flip side is to have everything be open source.
Just a point of reference. Scott from the Des Moines Register. This is testimony of what we mean by being transparent. And if there was someone here from the police department, they'd be welcome. Or someone from the corporate elites, they'd be welcome. It's transparent.
Campaign offices.
Campaign. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to ask a question.
Go ahead.
Does open communication have something to do with communicating with the corporate elites about what you want and them?
Yes.
I think you have to, there are two things going on there. And one is what we call sacred listening, which is listening, truly listening, not with that marshaling my arguments against everything you're about to say way of listening, debate listening. Not doing that, but also being willing to state your truth honestly and openly. So you have to be clear about what it is you're saying and also open to what somebody else is saying.
Very true. I would just say, too, though, that communication, for it to be open, it's got to be equal. It's got to come from a position where both communicators are on equal ground. Right now, the communication is all one way. The big banks and the Wall Street corporations and the people in Washington, they tell us what to do. We have no voice. Our voices have been silenced. And so they need to sacredly listen to us. You know what I mean? Because we've been listening. We've been there talking to them. And all we want to do is exert our own power so that we can bring that relationship back to equilibrium, and then we can have true open communication. But as long as there's a power imbalance, true open communication is impossible.
Just one more on this, and then we'll move on.
Just to respond to David, I get where you're coming from, and you're probably right. But I think in terms of our conduct, in terms of our means and ends, we've got to conduct ourselves in such a way that we're demonstrating the principles of the world that we're trying to create. And the other thing I wanted to say about open communication is that I believe that we're engaged in an effort to persuade people over to our side based on the truthfulness of our cause. And I know that just as a basic human thing, that there are people when people are shut down, when people are in a defensive, communication can't happen, persuasion can't happen. So we have to do whatever we can to promote an environment in which people aren't closed down on the inside, an environment in which there's a space for people to be receptive.
Okay, that's all. At this point, there's at least one or two people who have not spoken up yet. Yourself?
Judd hasn't spoken.
Right. And
I know he's got
you
lots
just
of
gave an
thoughts.
affirmation, but not a full acclamation. I'd like to give both you guys a chance to reflect on anything, because a lot of us speakers just jump right out there and spoke.
Okay. Well, I'd like to just comment kind of on what has been said here in the recently. Okay, in order to search for truth, communication must be kept open. So right now, I feel like it's been established that communication isn't open within all of the corporate elite, between the corporate elites and us. So we kind of have to work from there. So is the communication that we're choosing to focus on amongst each other in this movement, or is it more of a goal that we're trying to open communication globally? You know what I mean? Or within all of our. So I guess that's kind of the question I'm leaning toward. Like, what does this mean?
You asked the question, not to be answered at this time.
Okay.
You get to speak.
Actually, let me go ahead and hop in on the next issue.
All right, you'll get the first comment. Enduring suffering appeals to an opponent's humanity. Take it away.
I didn't want to be the first.
That's all right.
Are you kidding? Oh, you didn't want to be the first?
No, I didn't want to be the first one.
Okay.
I'm kind of a quiet person. I just like to kind of soak in what's going on. So when I feel like I can really jump in, I'll hop in.
I will not move from one point to the next until we give you an opportunity to speak. All right. Having you that inclination. So, enduring suffering appeals to an opponent's humanity. I would like to address this, beginning with you. You're saying people will be attracted to the truths that we have. And when I hear that word truth, I think cerebral truths. I think facts. I think great argument. I think, revealing what really is going on. That sort of thing. But I know people do not act on that kind of truth. If that kind of truth meant anything, we'd never gotten into the most recent war in Iraq that we're trying to get out. That truth does not measure in human experience. What measures in convincing people is human equity and personal sacrifice. What is so appealing about these wars, even when we know that they're wrong, even when we know that we've been lied to, even when we know that there are untold war crimes committed on our side, the compelling thing about the wars today is that we have our people in the field putting a lot of human equity and personal sacrifice on the line. It's an appealing thing. We in the movement who are trying to change society for the better, and in this case the occupation movement, we have to convince our fellow citizens that we want to put a little human equity and personal sacrifice on the line, and a compelling argument that they ought to look at our truths and start seeing the world from our point of view is that we're out there camping. That's compelling. That we're out in the street protesting. That's compelling. And that some of us are willing to go to jail for our convictions. That is compelling. That is what it means to endure suffering in the civil disobedience, civil resistance mode. Will appeal to people who disagree with us, saying like, we're crazy, but they must have something because they're pretty consistent and they're willing to look at. That's how hearts and minds are changed, not by facts.
And there's a lot of evidence in this current Occupy movement to suggest that may be true. The Occupy Wall Street movement gets criticized all the time for not having a coherent argument for what's wrong with the world and what the solution is. Yet it's the number one news story in the country. It's got broad-based popular support among supporters who are not active occupiers. And I would at least throw out the argument that the reason why we have broad public support, despite the quote claims that we can't make a coherent argument, is because people are out there freezing their butts off in the winter, showing that they care so much about something that they're willing to sacrifice for it. And then number two, because every time you turn on YouTube, you see police beating up peaceful protesters who have no weapons and who are doing, at the most, linking arms with each other, and they're getting whacked over the head or tear gassed or whatever else. And the one guy in Oakland was almost killed because of it. That creates tremendous amount of public sympathy. And when you combine that with high unemployment and severe income inequality, you're guaranteed to have a movement with some legs behind it.
Any more comment on this part? Right. Wait.
I was just laughing.
That's the beginning of a response.
I totally agree with what David is saying. I work in a IT environment, and I catch people surfing the internet and stuff all the time at work. Like, I know this is the top story in the country right now, and you know, the place I work at is going to have a lot of people that are not going to support this movement. But you know, they can't even help but look at it at work. I mean, it's all over the TV, and here they are pulling this up during the day when they should be working. You know, it does appeal to everybody, and you know, and people being outside freezing and being, you know, beaten and having their equipment taken away. It does show that people are passionate about it, and it is appealing to them. It touches everybody.
He gets the last word. So the next one. Nonviolence brings hidden or denied conflicts into the open so they can be addressed.
I love that.
I just want to share how I experienced this with this movement. When I started talking to the two cops that were sent to, you know, start talking about what are we talking about, direct action, what are we looking at here, how can we help each other, which is what a you know, a nonviolent campaign will be doing. The fact that we're nonviolent gives these police a reason not to be edgy, not to be overboard by saying, you show us attitude, we're going to show you attitude, blah, blah, blah. And what it does is, remarkably, how they all, both of these guys shared how sympathetic people who are police are to our movement. They know that they're part of the 99%. And being nonviolent allows that kind of hidden sympathy, because if they're police and they're coming onto a scene where people are breaking the law, they're supposed to have a certain sense of who the lawbreakers are and cop an attitude and bring them in. With us, they're saying, like, we're going to do our job, but we want you to know that a lot of people in the police department agree with what's going on. Right. And that's a remarkable hidden treasure of nonviolence.
The fire department said the same thing, too. It's like, yeah, it's awesome.
And you see so many people, so many soldiers and people in the military coming back from war that you know, like the guy that was shot down in Oakland, and you know, it's amazing to see that happen.
Where did you stand in unaffected?
Got anything to add to this point?
The only thing I would add is that the conflict was income inequality and homelessness and a foreclosure crisis and the unemployment rate. All these lack of transparency, lack of meaningful participatory democratic mechanisms, and people knew about it and it was whatever, but it wasn't being addressed by anybody. Nobody was talking about it in the mainstream public discourse. We were talking about cutting Social Security and cutting corporate taxes, not about the problems of corporate control. But when this movement happened, this nonviolent movement happened around the country, all of a sudden that conflict is rising up to the top. And you're seeing people, at least rhetorically, start to bring up those issues. And that's the first step in a long, long process to actually getting concrete, tangible results out of it.
Absolutely, it's changing the conversation across the country and the world.
All right, nonviolence is not passive.
Yeah, but people can definitely be actively nonviolent by things, you know, as simple as getting out of your own house in the morning and going to a position where we're occupying. I mean, that's an action right there. You're not just sitting at home watching TV, you're just taking what's going on in the world. You're getting out and doing something about it.
The way this question strikes me is I often give talks in educational settings, high school, colleges. And when I speak about a nonviolent alternative, inevitably a person, usually a male, will say, so we're just supposed to roll over and die? You know, like, well, our wrongs happen, we're just supposed to let it happen? And it's lack of an imagination of what nonviolence is that a young person would say that. Because I said, look, my heroes are Martin Luther King. You think he's passive? You know, Mahatma Gandhi. What are you not hearing here? And he's so long steeped into the violent culture that they can't really believe any good can come from a nonviolent effort. We're going to talk about war on drugs, you know, war on poverty. We can't do anything effective in this country unless we're doing it in a war mode. That is a dominant cultural metaphor. And we're trying to address the contrary one. people can't even have an imagination of what nonviolence looks like. Any more? All right. Accept blows without retaliation, which is a version of enduring suffering appeals to our opponent's humanity. Only enduring suffering appeals to our opponent's humanity is a bit abstract. Accepting blows, punches in the nose, a knock in the head, without retaliation might be a little more pertain to what we're going to be doing and the possibilities that might greet us.
A couple things pop into my head. One, this is the scary part
Right.
for me anyway. Or this is where the
We're into these things. Yes.
This is where the realm of possibilities begins to include possibilities that are scary. And my other thought is just again back to that first point of enduring suffering. It's very persuasive, you know. If I'm at home and I'm on the fence on an issue, and I see people like speaking up in a truthful and just and clear way, and I see them getting beaten down for it, and I see them, you know, not retaliating with violence, that's hugely persuasive. They have the moral high ground. You know, their commitment to this truth and to correcting the injustice, you know, that commitment becomes the most powerful dynamic that emerges out of the situation. If they don't start throwing punches back.
Right.
If they start throwing punches back, then they lose all that power.
One thing and talk about effectiveness versus not effectiveness. One common claim for just the strategic and tactical effectiveness of nonviolence is that it clearly exposes the repressive role of the police state in repressing social movements. If you start fighting back, if you hold your ground and start street fighting with cops, even if you believe that is an okay thing to do, and you can make a credible argument about self-defense and things like that, it allows the state to obscure and obfuscate who is really at fault for the violence. And then when when it's on TV and on CNN and stuff, all you see is people burning shit and throwing rocks through windows. The average person, they lose that clarity about who's to blame. But when you see cops beating, in Berkeley, all these 20-year-old kids linking elbows, and they're like beating them over the head and ramming them in the guts with their things, it's very clear who's to blame for the violence.
Yeah. I really think probably the main blow that we're going to receive, at least out of the occupying the presidential offices, is most likely just going to be statements such as, "Why don't you get your own candidate?" Will probably most likely be the main blow we'll get. Does anybody have any ideas how to respond to that?
Yeah, we don't need our own candidate. We got enough of them out there. Walk their space, and we want to see if there's any of them real. Just a practical sense for those who personally are aware or fearful of this. Someone hitting you in the head, some cop, some authority person, or some wacko, or some counteractive person coming in and just start wailing on them. Try to take some comfort that you're going to be with others. You know, and that if you say, "I'm not sure how I'm going to handle myself in front of a potential personal assault because I might just go to habits of defending myself." And if you tell somebody, that's part of the training, and hopefully we'll say, everybody have a buddy. And a buddy is a friend who you're going to stand with each other, and you're going to watch each other and monitor each other's behavior. Especially if you're not sure of your space and haven't done this before. Make sure you get so you can have a certain common link. And there's an assurance that you just have walking in when someone belts you when you're kneeling down. You're with lots of other people. And when we do see things like that, hopefully we'll be in such a way we'll have peacekeepers, people come around, Or we can just be a moral support for the person getting smashed, saying, you know, stop that. The whole world's watching. That sort of thing. That's the kind of empowerment that I want you to feel and to have tangible when we get into those situations, that you're not alone. So that's the first. Usually we act like that when you think you're alone. You got no other options. Okay, that's a concrete concern. Nothing to say? All right. Refuse possession or use of weapons. Pretty much that's a no-brainer. Yeah. Or little things that may be construed as weapons. Or don't bring a needle punch or whatever. I don't know, a mail opener or anything like that. Just mindfulness. Mindfulness is real important walking into these things. Assets of nonviolent resistance. Assets of nonviolent lends control of a situation. How do they see that as an asset to nonviolent resistance? Lends control.
If we were going to go into a situation and say, like, I'm carrying a Glock and you're carrying a billy club, you're carrying a bat, the cops are going to see this and say, okay, these are people that we need to physically stop, shoot, arrest, whatever the means may be. But if we walk into a situation peacefully, non-violently, they're going to say, maybe we're actually interested in hearing what they have to say. You know, we're not going to have to be on the defensive. We can maybe have a two-way communication going on here.
I see it as like self-discipline. It takes a lot of self-discipline and just centeredness to remain, non-violent. And so, in a non-violent resistance, collectively, a collective self-discipline to not participate in the dominant metaphor. You've taken control of the conversation, really, and you've moved it out of the realm of impulsivity that sometimes governs sort of rioting behavior where it's like this.
Bedlam and chaos. I mean, what's the we all seen these anarchist kids, or maybe they're not kids, maybe they're old folks, whatever they are, folks who are anonymous, folks who go and they don't show their faces, and they just trash things. That's putting chaos into the situation. And they can't really control it. They can just put the lever and say chaos, and then chaos comes down on them, and then they run away. So that's the only thing they do, is they get to pull the lever chaos. And chaos is exactly what the military aspect of our police are prepared to do. When they see chaos, that's justifying their violent acts. So they're playing right into each other. This gives us a sense of control of a potentially chaotic place, because we're entering in a place where we're saying we're breaking the law. Normally when people are breaking the law, it's a chaotic moment. But in a nonviolent discipline thing, we still have a control on how it's coming down.
I think another great example too was when a week ago yesterday we had about 100, 120 people march to Wells Fargo and Bank of America on Ingersoll, and both of those banks were open because it was a Saturday morning. And there was kind of like this tension between, are the protesters in control, or are the police and the bank operators in control? And when we got to the front door, they were able to keep us out of the bank lobby. And the police had a tremendous amount of leverage over us because they were the police, and they could, arrest us and throw us in jail, and no one there was really interested in doing that day. So they had some leverage on us, but we also had some leverage on them. We had 120 people there who were non-violently speaking out. We started to run our program just how we had planned it, even though the police were in some people's faces saying, like, I will arrest you right now. Now, if we had reacted violently when the police said, leave right now, or you're going to be arrested, we would have lost control, because the police can always out-escalate us. They can always out-escalate us. But what we did instead was a non-violent tactic. We kept running the program, and then right before they were really going to start arresting people, and they were telling us to leave, which would be, if we left when they said to leave, we would let them be in control and let them dictate. But what we did is we said, okay, now we're ready to go. Is everybody ready to go to Bank of America? And people were like, yeah, let's go to Bank of America. And then we turned around and left. And so we actually maintained control of the situation because we left on our terms instead of theirs.
The next one says keeps options open, which is just a general flow from the top one. If you do have control, some sense of control, part of the perks of control is you have options. Now let's go back to the anarchists with the hoods. That all they introduced to the thing is chaos. And they don't have any control of the next step other than to run away, which only adds to the chaos. This is control, gives us options beyond chaos. Eliminates rationale for violence. Now, what is the rationale? What would our anarchist friends who trash things and run away, what's the rationale for violence for their point of view?
Are you asking why do they do that?
Well, they have a rationale for violence. And when we choose the nonviolent rationale, we're eliminating their rationale.
Well, let's see. From what I've seen from them, I'm not sure. That's a really good question.
Well, they'd contest with us. They'd say, you guys are purely ineffective. And then we'd say, you guys are purely ineffective. So we'd have different things of the discussion. But what we eliminated is because there's no negotiating with these people. You know, trash it all, rebuild it all. And we're going like, no, we don't believe that. And we believe that the solutions we're looking for, we're going to need these people to work with. You know, that's what's the beauty about the 99%. For us to work, we got to get that other percent in on us also. And we got to start convincing the 99% what we're about is in their interest. Because a lot of them don't get it yet. And that's okay. Yeah, we're working on that. So nonviolence gives you the opportunity to say, we want everybody in this thing. Whereas our friends, the anarchists, saying, these guys will never be in, destroy the damn thing and rebuild the whole thing. Interesting point of view, that's a rationale. I don't buy it. And people who believe in nonviolence don't buy it. Or even if you don't believe it, you're not going to practice it. You know, when it gets it right down to it, we're looking for people who will practice nonviolence on those days to work. And then we're going to work on trying to be nonviolent people for the rest of our lives. Yes?
Maybe this is a little off topic, but I'll just throw it out there. I think maybe the anarchists, or however we refer to them, the people who want to throw rocks, my sense is that they're just doing it because it feels good, which is something I can connect with and respect, because I am angry too, and would really love to, you know, but I think it's a poor strategy. So, and that's what I haven't heard from those quarters. I haven't heard from them a clear articulation of strategy. That's all.
At the same time, though, I feel like there's a lot of people that you have anonymous hiding their faces and stuff like that. I feel like that's totally acceptable. Not everybody who supports anonymous is an anarchist. There's plenty of orchestration that they've been very active in the Occupy movement. A lot of it has been nonviolent. I don't know. I don't agree with the breaking of the glass and violence and stuff like that, but I don't know. I saw Anonymous got touched on there a couple times. I have no affiliation with Anonymous. I've watched plenty of their videos. I do know that a lot of stuff they do is nonviolent. So I just wanted to open that up to everybody that was here.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're right. We shouldn't get too sloppy about how we talk about things, because I also have loved many things that I've seen.
They've done some truly amazing things, like stuff that.
Okay. Fair enough. Thanks. Now, next point. Creates openness and honesty that can be enhanced, respect, and trust. Well, we kind of talked about that, didn't we?
I think so.
Anybody wants to say anything add into that? Speaks to the best in people rather than exploiting their weakness.
Interesting.
That's again, we're speaking to everybody's best. We want everybody into this, even the 1%.
We're inviting them back into the fold.
Yeah,
to come back.
Creates confidence, personal empowerment, and self-respect.
That's demonstrably true, speaking personally.
Share a little bit about that.
Now that since October 9th, I've gotten more and more involved with this thing that we're all involved with. And my sense of connection with something that is larger than myself has gone a long ways towards like removing my own personal ego problems from. I'm so focused on trying to do whatever I can to make this effort better that I'm less shy. I am more confident. Because I'm not worried about me. I'm really so connected to this work that we're doing that it's just. Yeah. I'm getting a lot of personal benefit out of it. So I just want to testify that this is really, that there's a lot of great personal stuff to be gained.
Empowering. I spent years and years staring at my television or my computer, yelling at it, feeling alone.
Right.
So it's just empowering to be able to be around so many like-minded people and not feel alone.
It's powerful to be among a lot of people that believe the same thing you do and that are working to achieve the same goals you are. It helps people rediscover that we have power as people, and that if we use it and exercise it in a strategic way, we can achieve great things.
Unless anybody sees something down there that they would like to speak to, really, please do. I'm sorry, but this is the point of this whole exercise. And we might look on the very last. It's on the other page. It says, on the question of effectiveness. That's a big one, and I'm sorry we didn't get to it.
Can we read it out loud in the last 5 minutes?
Why don't you go ahead, David, and read it.
The question of effectiveness. There are no guarantees that any action taken to create social change will be effective. Although we hope to create broad-based change, our success in choosing nonviolence as a way of life is change already made. Making a personal commitment to a lifelong lifestyle of nonviolence, one that is an alternative, is a continuous process. We can and should examine what works per individual to ensure that we are growing, taking care of ourselves, being honest in our motives, and positively affecting others. In choosing a lifestyle of nonviolence, we become personally empowered and responsible to live the reality of the change we want to create.
And the dark side of this effective, ineffective is we need to admit that acting in nonviolent ways may not save our lives. Some of us may have to die in this process. I'm putting it out, okay? It's the same thing people go to war have to face. And I'm just trying to say, when we think about comparative human equity, personal sacrifice, we send people wrongly to leave this country to go fight in wars of exploitation. And they ultimately pay high prices for it. We who are in the peace movement and in the change movement and the justice movement have to start saying, honoring that, and then saying, we're willing to do the same. And there's no guarantees that this will be the last social movement.
I just want to say one thing on that. Seek to befriend your opponents. Oh wait, no. Become a person to those in opposition. Don't shut down in response to violence. I met a priest named Peter last week who does a lot of work with peacekeeping teams, and he told me one of the basic things they do is they introduce themselves by name to somebody and ask that person's name, and that it's a very disarming, de-escalating way to affirm their personhood and that you're willing to be in conversation with them. And it was interesting because I saw him got to use that in action, and there was a small conflict he was having with somebody, and it really worked. He introduced himself, and all of a sudden, the tone and the nature of the interaction completely just mellowed. So I just thought that was a good tactic maybe to use sometimes if you find yourself in a place.
Thank you. Do we have any more time?
I don't know. Where are we at on time?
Can I get your phone?
The point of this meeting today.
Oh, I appreciate your words. Glad we swallowed it out.
Yeah, that was fun.
Philosophy and tradition.
There's a lot of stuff.
Non-violence, civil disobedience. We're trying to connect to things, trying to connect to strategies for social change that we see in this country. We're trying to connect to the work that MLK
We do our actions, but if you don't, that's okay too.
I think there are a lot of stuff.
Do you worry that such everybody has to figure out the best place to
call out.
Yeah, I'm taking a long view on the whole social movement. I mean, I think social change is a gradual process. So, in terms of my personal involvement, everything's unpredictable. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how successful our caucus mobilization is going to be. I hope it's going to be wildly successful. But personally, I'm looking at like a lifetime.
Okay.
So I'm taking a long view, and I hope as many other people as possible will also, start to frame their thinking in terms of a long-term and strategic. It's always got to be strategic. So we've got to move things forward, but this is the baby phase.
Part of that process is a long-term process of articulating the specific demands, or do you think those are fully formed at this point?
Well, I think this is the coolest, most fascinating dynamic, because on the one hand, you can look at the situation and say, oh, they're not specific. There's like 100 different things. But at the same time, everyone kind of gets it. Everyone they see people standing up, and they look at their own lives, and they get it. They understand what it's like. So I think ultimately it's going to be kind of a non-issue.
You do.
I think that specific, targeted, strategic campaigns will emerge from within the larger social movement. And I just think we're in an initial phase of just kind of mobilizing people to connect with the big concepts, the big truths. And at some point, I do think some specificity will emerge. But I don't know. I saw Cornel West talking about it. I think he was addressing Occupy Wall Street, and he was just talking about how the voicing of grievances is a really great and a really American activity to be involved in. It's appropriate, it's constructive, and so just being loud and noisy and upset and pissed off in a nonviolent context, that's a great thing for us to be doing right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
The process, and we wanted to create a drafting
Everybody's got to have the partnered
that
up
did
with
mix
somebody.
with people, where it wasn't just a few individuals that drafted their ideas. We wanted input from the entire group. So that's why it's a slower process.
Okay. Can I get your name?
Someone go through some kind of experiential thing that is commensurate with something you might have to deal with, caucus occupation. So I want one of you to be the policeman, and the other one be the occupier of the office. And the policeman, you've already been warned. you already been told if you don't leave, you're going to be arrested. And then they already said to everybody that don't want to move, and the cop is going to move you. The people on the right, my right, you guys are the cops.
Oh, we're the cops.
The people on the left, you are the demonstrator. Cops,
Unemployed work.
So what do we do?
demonstrator.
Oh, so we're the cops.
It's a football metaphor. It's okay.
This row is the cops. We are the occupiers.
Okay.
Okay. Ready? Go. Act it out. You got to get rid of this protester. Move them. Be serious.
Get out.
It's time to go. It's time to go. I used to be so uncooperative.
Okay.
No, it's fine. You can leave right now. Well, let's go. They're going to take you to jail. You're going to jail, okay? Like, how many arrests do you have in your life? Do you have any? You're going to make me arrest you.
Okay.
Credit? That's going to fuck up your life.
Pulling out my pepper spray.
Any idea how bad this is going to be for you?
Okay, come on
You
back.
can leave right now.
Have you
I
ever
don't want
been
to
to
do
jail?
this. You don't want to do this.
Hey, you guys. Okay.
You don't want to go to jail. I don't want to take you to jail, but I'm going to have to. You can leave right now. It's fine. Like, if you leave, I don't have to arrest you. If I arrest you,
Okay.
I have to fill out
Would you
paperwork.
please?
I don't want to fill out
Let's try
paperwork. You don't want to sign that paperwork. You don't want to go to court.
You got it
Judge
down.
is going to care.
You got to pay attention, you guys.
Ray, you pulled the chaos lever. What do you expect?
Now, the way this can be beneficial for more than just yourselves and your experience is some of the people who were cops. Would you tell what you felt like when you were doing this stuff? What did it feel like? Frustrating.
You're frustrated? You're smiling the whole time.
What? Someone said freak out why?
No, you were good.
Hold on. Here's the way. You guys are like fourth graders. You know, the way this thing is supposed to work, you're supposed to listen.
One conversation.
One conversation. Just come on. Give yourself a little break. Listen. So, go ahead, Aaron. You were saying like it felt what?
I felt a little scared. I felt a little threatened. I felt a little freaked out. My anxiety level was high, and I felt my fight or flight kind of adrenaline system kicking in, all of that.
So, what does that tell you about you're possibly confronting a Des Moines police officer?
I might get freaked out.
Who? You, the cop? No.
What's your question?
What I'm saying is, what does that tell you about the cop you might be confronting?
That he or she might be freaked out. They might be scared.
Right. That's real important. That's important. Another cop reaction. Are you a cop? Yeah. Go. How did you feel?
I was at first really intimidated because he's super tall, but and a guy and I'm a girl, so I shouldn't be. But then also I work at a bar and he was really easy to remove. Like I just. Like, as soon as I grabbed a hold of him, it was just like, no, we're going, and he just, it was fairly easy. So it was gone right away.
Another cop, yeah.
I actually would like to know how Tyler felt.
All right, Tyler, because you were doing a lot of good eyeball contact. Yeah. You were trying to you took your role very seriously. How did it feel? Yes,
I mean, there's a certain righteousness behind that because you're doing your job and you know that you have the power and you know that whatever's going to happen, you have the physical force to back it up. Yeah. And you can get in somebody's face and scream at them, and you know that there's not necessarily going to be any consequences for you because you have 50 other cops behind you, and you can pretty much do or say what you want.
Right.
Yeah, you have a sense of authority and righteousness because you're on the side of the law and doing whatever you need to do.
And you felt that?
A little bit.
If you felt that, then we can think that when you're confronting with a policeman, they're going to feel that way, and you got to start thinking like, how do I make this nonviolent communication? How do I de-escalate the situation? How do I make the cop feel comfortable? You know, that's no small thing.
Your hands were
shaking. His hands were shaking.
Yeah, and I thought he's getting angrier and angrier. So and at the beginning, I tried to have a dialogue with you. I was responding like, well, okay, Governor Branstad doesn't care, but there are other people. Lots of 99% of the people care. And I started to do that. And then when I saw your hands were shaking and you were just escalating, you're shouting at me, I thought,
he's really angry. I'm not going to convert him. I'm not, but he wasn't doing anything to me. He didn't try to remove
Well, and
me.
the thing is,
we were linked to, I thought, sure,
well, no,
somebody was going to pull us out of here.
it's a psychological dance because I'm threatening you with all this stuff, and then I'm giving you the opportunity to leave and make it easier for everybody. And it's scary, scary, scary threats, and then a way out. And then if you don't respond, scary, scary, scary threats, and then a way out. I mean,
and see, I stopped listening. I couldn't keep listening to that, but I could watch your hands, and I wasn't going to look at your face. And I said nothing, and I felt completely in control. I mean, I really did. I thought.
Yeah. At some point, the cop would have just used pain compliance techniques or excessive force.
Yes.
And your first name?
Joe.
Joe. Well done. And now, there are schools of thought on how to deal with a policeman. She said she did not look at the guy at one point. Because she was adamant, like, I'm just going to stay here. This is all I'm doing. There's no way I can reach him. And that often happens. And then there's another school of thought, get the guy's eye contact. Try to start some personal communication. Just an old school with cops in an arrestable situation, I recommend you don't try to use humor. Because humor can often be misconstrued, and then in a situation where someone has power over you, they can hurt you. So it's best not to be flippant, best not to be cute. This is not one of the times you want to have one of your most pithy statements. You just want to be very respectful and civil to these folks. Because Aaron said it, you know, they go in a conflict. We pay these guys to go into chaos. They're crazy. We don't pay them enough for the things they have to do. So that's what they bring in their work. We want to de-escalate that kind of mano-to-mano anger thing. And that's what nonviolence does. Another a person who was a demonstrator. How did it feel? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was partnered with Aaron. And, you know, my deal, because he wasn't in your face and starting to get really angry and stuff like that, was to first tell him, hi, my name's Jeannie, what's your name? You know, and he says, no, you got to get out of here. You got to get out of here now. You know, they don't pay you enough to do this, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. You guys are exactly on the forefront of what we are talking about, and I just kept talking to him, trying to engage him. I know that you guys are a big part of that 99%. You know.
She was very non-threatening too, I have to say. Even though I felt anxious, I mean, the way it came across to me actually was pretty non-threatening. But then again, you know, you're a lot shorter than me.
I'm shorter and I'm an old lady, so
yeah. I'm just saying there's value in being what you are, perhaps.
I'm shorter and I'm an old lady. I often use that. I'm an old man, watch my shoulders. I use every tool in the book that I can to soften the cop's heart. And you're right. And you can get away with saying a lot more than, let's say, where's our friend? Because you're not going to have it's harder for you to make a communication to a cop because younger women, you know, younger women are not older women. And this is a crazy culture we got. I'm just saying, being aware of that. Or who was our friend with this scarf? If you were without your, you know, anonymous and stuff, that is threatening to a cop when they're arrested because they want to see people's faces. You know, but know you're doing that. Just know you're doing that. It's going to call on you more to be nonviolent. That sort of thing. Any other protesters?
I do have a question here.
Go ahead.
So, let's say that me and David are standing next to each other, and the officer who confronts him does become, you know, violent or anything like that. Do I try to protect David, or do I stand back and let David make his own judgment on what he should do? Because once two people get involved, another officer gets involved, and then more officers get involved, and more protesters get involved.
The real question is, I think, well, one, do I want your help or not?
Right.
Two, if I do, how do you try to intervene but remain in a nonviolent, which is really, really tricky. One way, if you try to get in between somebody, like I would recommend like this, you know what I mean? Like, because it's clear that you're not a threat, even though you're using your body as a barrack, as kind of like a barrier. You should also be pretty prepared to get. You could be. It's non-violent, but it could escalate.
Here's the next step. You know, they're going to physically
grab your arm. You could go and hug the person and face them, and then you're not even.
Not the cop. You're not hugging the cop. The fellow
demonstrators.
Do not touch police officers.
You know, anything we can to like not let them go, so that the cop cannot take them.
Sometimes but face them.
It can be successful. De-arresting, a de-arrest technique or something. But that's pretty. This is like graduate level stuff we're talking about.
One thing I
have a
would
workshop
point
on
out too is by doing that, the potential for violence escalates, because once the cop gets physical, the moment he's pulling you away, the minute you flail or
tighten up even.
Tighten up.
Yeah.
That becomes
resistance, and they'll escalate, and that's one of the things you could do. But you just keep saying, "Your Honor, officer, you don't need to hurt him. Officer, no one's hurting these people. There's no reason to hurt these people." A verbal kind of a record. Please stop. And the whole world is watching. The person getting beat up again knows in confidence they're not alone. They're with friends. They're not going to be. But really, the whole idea of tensing up, real important. If you do it intentionally. But know you're going to get beat up. If you don't, and a lot of people just, you got to know, you got to work this out in your head, because your initial action when someone grabs you is to tense up. It's just automatic. You've got to think beyond that automatic feeling, because as soon as you tense up, the policeman's going to have equal and more bountiful attitude towards you, and harsher. And that may be what you want, it may not be what you want, but it has to be thought out. Yes.
I have a couple things. When you initially were saying one of you is going to be an occupier, one of you is going to be a cop, I automatically made my game plan for whichever role you're going to give me. With being the occupier, I decided I was going to sit and I was not going to look at whoever was talking to me. And beforehand, I had said to Matt, I have back problems. Like, just so you know. Like, before we even got started, like, you said, you guys are cops, you're the protester. I'm like, I have back problems. Like, just so you know. And I sat, and my intention was, if he wants me to move, he's going to have to drag me away. But I'd already told him, like, be gentle. Like, if you're going to do it, be gentle. But, like, I'm not going to move. I'm not going to help you move me. But then Joe sat down and linked arms with me, and I got scared for her when Tyler was in her face. Like, I still feel scared for her because I thought, like, I've never felt like this. I honestly was sitting there like, oh, my God, like, he's going to knock her out. He's going to drag her away. Then what's going to happen to me once it happens to her? And that is so scary.
For the record, Tyler's a really nice guy.
Like, I'm about scared of my cop. I'm scared of her cop. like, oh my God, like, he's going to jack her up, and then what's going to happen to the other people down the line? Like, I've never felt like that. I'm so sorry, but, well, everybody who's seen me cry, I cry, but, like, even now my heart is just going crazy, because I was like, damn, Tyler, like, really, like, I just kept thinking, what's going to happen to her? And she's not doing anything wrong. You know?
Yeah. Danielle, that's really what these hassle lines are about, so we can get into our emotions and our feelings about things, and see areas in which we've got to work. And it's not impossible. But identifying that sort of stuff, really, really good stuff. Really good stuff. I'm impressed.
Imagine if you were on a hassle line and you've never seen that before, because they will do that.
Dude, you were like really good though.
Yeah.
That's why I said I wanted to know how you felt, because you were like, I mean, you were down on her.
I got to do whatever I got to do to get her out of here.
You were down on her level, and you were in her face, and I just kept looking at the ground, thinking like, damn, like, you know, like Matt gave up because he knew I wasn't going anywhere. But I think at the same time, like with him being a cop, he saw what you were doing, and he could have either chose to join the party or take a step back and look at it. And he took a step back and he kind of looked at it. And I just sat there like, what is going to happen here? Like, this is nuts. Just pure crazy.
Just for our own part, what did Danielle tell us about herself?
I'm a crybaby.
No, that has given us some information so we can advise her if she chooses. Back problems. You have back problems. Hello. Do not sit down. Cop asks you to go somewhere. You go with them. Do not put any because we're in it to get, you know, a strong statement, and we're going to come out of this whole. None of us are going to come out with badly back situations.
But that's my old lady card.
If you want to use your old lady card, don't sit down and resist arrest at the same time.
We're all telling you, do not sit down and put up a fuss, because you can wreck your back. And none of us are in here to wreck our backs. That is not the price we're going to pay mindfully.
So just get up and walk.
Get up and walk.
You can tell the police that you have a bad back. make sure you want to know that. But if you want them to treat you gently because you have a bad back, and don't sit down and resist arrest.
Yeah, you got to get up. And the other thing she says is, like, my initial advice to you at this point is, consider watching a number of these things before you actually do it, so that your cry gauge, which is really beautiful, or your fear gauge can be, you'll have a certain equity that you'll feel more confident in going this, because you've never been anything like this. So, and with that kind of emotional investment, my advice is consider strongly waiting for the second or third wave, so you can see these things, people come out and see how joyful, how important it is, how empowering it is, so you can actually experience it. And there were people here who were arrested, who didn't go to be planned arrested, October 9th? But you can speak to the empowerment, how extraordinary empowering that was. Is there someone here who got arrested who can speak about empowerment? Go ahead.
I was sitting clear in the back, so I saw almost everyone else get arrested before me, and to know that they're able to do that empowers you to know that you can sit there and wait to be arrested. Even seeing Rod, Mace, and even seeing Marcus brutalized by the police, the fact that they have it within them to do it, and it being my first time ever being arrested in that sort of situation, really helped me to remain calm and to breathe and to hope that I wasn't going to get arrested, but to know that when it was my time that I could go freely and it was the right thing to do.
Okay, guys. The problem with this situation right now is we're 3 minutes over time. We need to go to the General Assembly. I felt real good about this. Did people feel good about this? Yeah. We need to do more of these, right? Yeah. Get the word out. Let's get the word out, because we need to start training our own people locally before we invite the whole damn country to come in. So take the word back. Let's keep doing these things.
Yeah, and the next meeting of the caucus committee, which is
Monday
at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock at the camp.
Again, if you can make it, great. There's a lot to discuss, not just this stuff, but we got to discuss media and so much else.
Yeah. And we have direct actions on Wednesday and Saturday of this week. Wednesday at the public library at I think 5:30, and Saturday we're starting at 2:30 at Tower Park.
2:30 Tower Park.